Well, we have Dr. Rashid Akiyami, a consultant at the United Nations, joining us this morning in the studio. Good morning, and thanks for
Good morning, Dr. Akiyami. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Okay, let's begin with the initial question we asked. You know, if there was more to this than meets the eye concerning this persistent. In 2014, this was really the last time that we had this kind of persistent attacks, you know, on the northeast, including even the northwest. But in 2016, 2017, there seemed to have been some kind of progress, a huge progress made by the Nigerian troops, only for this, for 2018 to turn out to be a nightmarish year, you know, as far as the war on insurgency is concerned. What exactly do you think is going on from your standpoint?
Well, I think that what we're experiencing in Nigeria, in the northern part of Nigeria, it's not strange, because this is one of the dropout of, number one, the 9/11. Second, the attempt to categorize every demand from groups who were formerly not violent, attempt to categorize them as terrorists. And the question is, who is a terrorist? One man's liberation fighter is another one's terrorist.
Okay.
So from this point, it's very, very political. And Nigeria in particular, we shouldn't forget that across the West African region, there are various forms of attacks on state. And when you have a weak state like Nigeria, so it is very easy to have such groups that will actually enhance power to destabilize the state.
Well, when you say Nigeria is a weak state, that seems to be quite emphatic. Weak in what sense?
In the sense that Nigeria has actually lost its own part of prison society, what we call the social contract. Second, it's a weak state, and some will even say it's a pariah state, because Nigeria is dependent on everything on outside, including expecting foreign powers to come and help and fight Boko Haram. Nigeria is a weak state because at the end of the day, those who go there, because you have, state is different from government. So politicians go, they come. When they get state power, they exploit it. They will leave the state very, very weak, and it becomes very vulnerable. So we have what we call.
What you're doing actually is to, you know, diagnose, you know, how we got here, or why we're where we are. So the factors really are more internal than external.
The factors are very, very internal, because look at the northern part of Nigeria. There is a lot of poverty. Illiteracy is very high, and where you have so unequal development, definitely people will be very easier to be convinced about an alternative way
of survival. Okay.
All right. If we look at the countries surrounding the Lake Chad Basin, or the Lake Chad Basin, we have Niger Republic, Chad, Cameroon, and Nigeria.
Right.
But this insurgency, or the Boko Haram activity, seem to reside more in the Nigerian context. If we talk about the issue of illiteracy, we talk about the factor of poverty and all of that, Niger Republic has a chunk of it. In fact, when it comes to comparison, Niger Republic or Chad or Cameroon, for that matter, don't even stand close to where Nigeria is when it comes to these social issues. Right. But why is it the Nigerian flank that has this? That's why the question arises, whether there's more than meets the eye as far as this is concerned.
Because it's easier even to recruit those people from countries that you mentioned to become part of Boko Haram. Because they also they are also the victims of circumstances, poverty and hunger. So we shouldn't believe that those who make up the Boko Haram are Nigerians alone. They are not. There was a time we had mercenaries also who have come to war and to fight, to make money.
Yeah.
So I think the northern axis in Chad and those areas, they are filled with people that actually are very willing and ready to go for anything.
Yes, but is it more of an economic thing, or is it external aggression that's playing out? Because when you say that most of the, a good number of the, the Boko Haram recruits and, ISWAP and the rest of them are actually non-Nigerian, should we then begin to see this as external aggression? I mean,
it is both exogenous and endogenous.
Okay, both internal and external.
Exactly. And the external one, which have not much been discussed in Nigeria, is exactly who is funding Boko Haram. Where is the money coming from? They were so sophisticated when they started earlier with their vehicles, and they were capturing everywhere, and they were putting their flags down. So who is sponsoring them? Definitely, we might have individual Nigerians for particular political interest, but we had a lot of external forces who's sponsoring Al-Shabaab. So the Nigerian Boko Haram is just one aspect of the large network of terrorist groups that came down from the Osama bin Laden's something and then spread.
Yes.
And as such, we would expect that Osama bin Laden was a very rich man. He had industries, he established many things.
Yeah.
So money might be coming down. And don't forget that there are countries who are ready to sell weapons, because you don't, weapons is one of those areas that people actually make money. So these weapons are not made in Nigeria. They're not made in West Africa.
Now, that angle is the angle that a lot of people say we're not exploring enough, so that we can actually determine how to counter this, terrorism and insurgency in the northeast. And of course, it's beginning to spread to the northwest, where you have banditry and all kinds of other, non-state actors taking up arms. Of course, it's been pointed out that, there's a preponderance of weapons in the hands of these people. And you raise a very vital question: how are they getting these weapons? Exactly. So I read a piece not too long ago that actually tried to connect the dots, as to the French connection in all of this, where, as a matter of fact, in 2014 or thereabout, Nigeria actually tried to review her foreign policy, especially with countries like France and the rest of them, because of their involvement in Mali.
Right.
And that may be playing out. Some people have also talked about the issue of oil. Oil has been discovered in Borno, for example. Okay. And is this an attempt by external forces to create chaos, a chaos situation, so that they'll have a free reign, and the leeway to the resources? That's why I asked the question: is it more of economic, in terms of not just the economies of the locals, right, but the external forces? Yes,
it is. But I will emphasize less the involvement of France in that respect. Because actually, what we have, and if we say the West, we will, if we go back to 2011, 9/11,
yes,
and then we had people writing about Islam, especially Huntington, who wrote about clash of cultures and civilization. So all these things, it mounted to the fact that there is still a very strong negative aspect on Islam from the Western world. And second, who tells us that Boko Haram is fighting on behalf of Islam? So it had carried out attacks in many parts
both
of
in Muslim and non-Muslim areas.
So, what is this? Is this an insurgency? And what does that mean? Just to topple the government of the day, to establish their own form of government.
All right. Now, there are mineral resources in the Lake Chad Basin. We have petroleum, we have gold, we have natron, we have uranium, limestone, kaolin, salt.
Yeah. Uranium is the most important because of the capacity for nuclear weapon. And that's why every Western world will prefer that Niger Republic and where we have uranium, that no human being should live there again so that they can actually
extract.
Exactly.
Because we understand there's a large deposit of uranium in Niger Republic, and
Yes.
that has been extracted also with the help of France and other countries. Now, let's come back to the issue of the Nigerian foreign policy. Africa is the centerpiece of Nigerian foreign policy.
One time.
One time, okay. But where we stand right now, whether it has been reviewed like you were talking about, I wonder what the direction is right now. You mentioned the issue of Nigeria being weak to a great extent.
Yeah.
When we had Africa as the centerpiece, Nigeria was kind of stronger.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll allow, of course, Dr. Rashid Akinyemi to answer this very, very important question.
Now, I was asking a question earlier on as to the Africa being the centerpiece of Nigeria foreign policy before. You said before. And that time Nigeria was strong, like you put it. But where we are right now, when it comes to engaging these countries, the president has traveled to some of these countries, the chief of defense staff and all, they have all been to those countries. What kind of engagement goes on between Nigeria and the Lake Chad countries in handling this issue?
Well, you see, Nigeria still maintains a sort of hegemonial role. And that plays out in many ways where even at the detriment of some issues, the Nigerian government will go and intervene in some other countries. Nigeria is carrying the ECOWAS along. And all these things, they are because Nigeria is an asset to West Africa. Although some have said that Nigeria, you remove the, once we said Nigeria is the giant of Africa, some say we should remove the G and say Nigeria is the ant of Africa. But these are words that people play around, and that is as a result of the fact that the state, as I mentioned, actually is getting weaker and weaker, and that's why people look at what could the state do. The state should be powerful enough to handle this Boko Haram issue, but engaging the countries in the northern part, Chad and others, also shows that Nigeria is interested also in co-opting those countries in the fight, in the insurgency. Otherwise, if you face Nigeria alone and say it stops, it comes up again. And that is where I think the Western world have seen that well. President Buhari is doing a lot in terms of combating this issue of terrorism.
Yes.
Again, we shouldn't forget that the government said when it was coming to power, it wants to tackle terrorism, corruption, and
fix the economy.
And the economy. So I think in the period of 3.5, 4 years to come, the government has moved a lot in terms of three of these issues. But at the same, the economy is not, and that's why again we say Nigeria is a pariah state. It's an independent economy. It depends on our oil. If they stop buying the oil tomorrow, now we are shifting to agriculture. How many people will move to agriculture?
Well, it will depend then on what you mean by Nigeria being a pariah state. You would think that it's a state that's been ostracized by the rest of the world, but a lot of people would actually doubt that, considering the level of engagement of President Buhari with other countries, France, Germany, the United States,
Canada,
and all
Australia.
those countries.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will use another terminology. I will say
Nigeria.
Nigeria is still a neo-colonial state. If you don't want me to say.
Okay.
All right. But
Yes.
that would just amount to semantics anyway.
Okay.
But, all right.
All right, now the army, 3 days ago or so, actually said that, sabotage was fueling the war against Boko Haram. And you want to question exactly sabotage is it within the military or, you know, from outside the military? Because this is a very serious, you know, allegation on the part of the army.
Yes, you know, when such statements come out, there is no smoke
without fire.
Without fire, and we are seeing, for instance, that, as I said earlier, there was a time where the military, they had to run away when they found that the Boko Haram was getting more powerful.
Getting the upper hand.
Yes, and then of recent, the fact that Nigeria is approaching election, so we should take that into consideration. And every attempt now to fight Boko Haram, to at the same time focus on winning the election again, we will find people taking sides. So, well, why should he come again when he has not done enough in what he promised to do? Every day we have bombing and this and that. And there's one thing that is very peculiar in this case, that in the history of Africans, and Nigeria in particular, suicide bombing, especially for young girls, was never an issue. But it has become part and pattern of the insurgency. So that is a serious.
Is that to say that the insurgents have been able to actually brainwash to a very large extent not only the female population in the northeast, you know, but even the young men and women who, you know,
and even children.
Yeah, children.
The question: brainwashed with what? Is it brainwashed with religion, or because they say that, well, if you die, you die, and you go to heaven and this and that.
Okay.
So that's a very interesting book.
Of course, the book talks about frontiers of jihad, radical Islam in Africa.
That's the title.
Yeah, that's the title of the book. Quite interesting. I'm sure this is, you know, would be very, very revealing on the part of the author, Yinka Olomojobi.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very revealing, and a lot of research went into that to trace actually what is the origin of Boko Haram. Boko Haram was not the first insurgent group we had. We had the Maitamatse, and we had other ones before that finally came up with Boko Haram.
Yeah, but Nigeria has had this through her history, and one expects that by now Nigeria should have been able, like if an individual, a Nigerian, goes into doing a beautiful research and come out with a lot of revelations like this,
right,
how much more can the government do when it comes to having access to what are the causes, where is this coming from, and what strategies to use in taking care of this? So are you seeing the government taking that decisive action and the necessary strategies in handling this circumstance?
I think so.
Okay, but it's only so. not bearing enough fruits for Nigerians to see.
I think so, because the government is taking the issue of Boko Haram very, very serious.
It's 10 years this year,
right,
that Boko Haram has come out full-fledged.
Right.
And by now, anyone expects that. How long did the Sierra Leonean war take? How long did the war in Liberia take? And all of that. Nigerians, in fact,
this
Africans.
This is not a war.
A conventional war.
This is not a war, because Boko Haram, they are not military.
Okay.
You could call this a guerrilla war. There was a time they were looking for them looking for those girls under this Zambazi, what?
Sambisa forest.
Yes. So it's a hit and run. So as such, it is very difficult for a standing army to easily, conquer them. So these are the tragedies that we have.
There was a time where the Nigerian intelligence was able to infiltrate Boko Haram, getting to know where the leader of Boko Haram was, getting to know when, in fact, there was a picture of him sleeping at the time. There was a picture of, there was the revelation of him being shot and running to Mali for treatment and so on.
Right.
We don't get to hear about all of those anymore.
Yeah. Is there a failure of intelligence?
Although we don't expect the military to divulge all such information to us, but it gives a sense of inspiration to citizens to know that Nigeria is on top of the issue.
Yeah, we're not hearing of that anymore, because it's also an indication of how far the government has actually penetrated Boko Haram, it tells us also, because we've seen different pictures of who the leader was. Sometimes they come up with a tape recorder and say whether he was speaking from somewhere, and sometimes we see a picture. So actually, it became very difficult to pin down that this is the real person, Shekara, or that was behind it. So these are tactics. Yeah. These were the tactics that were used to such
and of
guerrilla.
course, there's the Al-Banawi faction. You know, the Boko Haram, the insurgency itself has been factionalized, which could be part of the challenges, you know, that the military is having. But we must say thank you very much.
And one thing I want to put in is that we shouldn't forget that the Shiite, you see, Nigeria, Islam is one. But we have these various others, the Shiite and the
Shia and the Sunni.
Yes, and if you look sometimes at the role of Shiite in other parts of the world, like in Iraq, Iran.
Yes.
So one might also suspect that even money might be coming from there.
Well, a lot of people will say, well, the Shiites are legitimate group one way or the other. Someone would argue that, and we certainly will leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid Akinyemi, consultant with the UN.
And I am also lecturer at the University of Lagos.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Did not mention that, but that's where I am
right now. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.